Today, we're going to hear from our asset managers about how pavement, bridges, and other assets are faring. You'll learn about the pressures our asset classes are facing, how we select projects, and more. Altogether, the assets we're discussing have a replacement value of more than $75 billion. So, of course, they're really at the heart of what CDOT offers the public, and the more we can learn about taking care of them, the better. Let's go to the next slide, please. We used to do these presentations in 6 hours. We're walking you through all the assets in just 2 hours today, so it's going to be quick. There will not be significant time at the end for questions. If you do have questions, please enter them into the chat as they occur to you. The asset managers will then take turns responding as soon as possible through the chat. So with that out of the way, let's step back and look at the big picture of asset management at CDOT. Next slide, please. First off, just what do we mean by asset management? We're not talking about building brand new roads or brand new bridges where there are none today. What we are doing is looking at the existing transportation system, and then we fund the most cost-effective mix of replacements, rehabs, and preventative work like sealing bridge decks. The idea here is that we leverage data, condition data, deterioration assumptions, and other data to decide how to extend the life of a bridge, for example, rather than waiting to buy an expensive new one. Our program, the asset management program, has been around at CDOT since 2012. You can see our 12 asset classes on the right: pavement, bridges, culverts, and more. We take care of all these assets with an annual budget of about $800 million. Next slide, please. Here you can see key functions of the TAM program. We coordinate the development of CDOT's 4-year asset treatment list. These lists are filled with things like bridge rehabs or culvert replacements, and these treatments are then turned into standalone projects by the regions, or they may be bundled by the regions into larger construction projects. The program also meets federal requirements for asset management, such as maintaining asset models. And finally, we facilitate discussions with executives about how to split the total asset dollars among the 11 asset classes. Next slide. We have had requirements for each asset class for some time now, and recently we put those in Policy Directive 1609. The first requirement is that you have to know what you're managing. So each asset class must have an inventory, and it might be surprising, but when some of these assets started, we didn't know where they all were. We didn't know how many of the assets we had. So that's a requirement. Second, each asset class needs a performance measure to measure the health of individual assets and the overall network. They need a performance target, and they need a model that can forecast future condition and can recommend the right mix of construction projects. Next slide, please. One confusing thing is that we fund 12 asset types, but it's still the case that more than 87% of our dollars go to pavement, bridges, and maintenance. You can see that in the blue there, and all the other assets are in gold. They're sort of fighting for scraps. The total of this pie, again, represents $800 million. That's our budget. It's been very flat for many years now, with the exception of maintenance and bridge enterprise. In fact, we conservatively estimate we would have to add about $300 million per year in 2028 just to get us back to our buying power in 2019. So this chipping away at buying power is certainly one of the themes you'll hear about today. Next slide. We're not the only state that has this kind of program. In fact, FHWA requires all DOTs to set targets and track performance of pavement and bridges. They also require us to maintain models for pavement and bridges. And finally, we do need to produce an asset management plan every 4 years. This plan does a lot of things for us. It forecasts funding and performance. It identifies our processes, our risk, our revenue, and our performance outlook. It talks about how the assets are treated throughout their life cycles. So when do we do a rehab? When do we do a replacement? You can find our plan easily online by Googling CDOT Asset Management Plan. Next slide. This chart shows how our model forecasts bridge condition. I'm showing this to help you understand charts like these, which we'll show throughout this presentation. The axis on the left represents our network condition. So how much of the network is in good or fair condition. The bottom axis shows you the years 2021 through 2040, and then the straight blue line is our performance target. The colored lines there, they show how we would do according to different budget levels. So the top line is what we expect, how we expect to perform against our current budget levels. And then that bottom line shows what would happen if we invested nothing. So you can see bridge deterioration quickly deteriorates. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're back to our agenda now. It's now time for each asset manager to walk you through one of the 12 asset classes. To kick things off, we're going to go to Hope Wright, who is going to show how CDOT manages about 1,200 maintenance, office, and other buildings. Hope?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So Hope Wright, Buildings Asset Manager. Next slide. Overview of our buildings. We have 1,168 total buildings statewide. Only 527 of those are included in our analysis, so we exclude cold storage and storage sheds. So we have 270 VSF, which are vehicle storage facilities, mechanics and traffic buildings, 196 sand sheds, and 61 offices and labs. Our responsibility is maintaining all CDOT buildings. We do annual condition assessments. We participate in the budget setting, and we handle capital construction as well as providing the regions with controlled and deferred maintenance to either maintain or improve our building condition. Next slide. So the risks of funding shortfalls for buildings are really based around equipment life and employees. So we think that a building is in poor condition, specifically our vehicle storage facilities, which are most abundant, if they can't fit a piece of essential equipment. So for us, a piece of essential equipment includes plows or bucket trucks. So if those buildings can't fit inside of a building, then that building is not serving its purpose. Its purpose is to house equipment. So as we go along that x-axis and we have equipment sitting outside, we obviously have a shortened equipment life. But as we go along the y-axis, we also have an operational impact. So we're asking our workers to work on equipment that is parked outside. That leads to injuries, and that leads to less maintainers on the road, which all combined together provides for a decreased level of service. So our goal is really to have as many pieces of essential equipment inside of a building as possible. Next slide. So our target metric is percentage of buildings in grade C or better. Our target is 85% of those buildings should be in a grade C or better. Next slide. So our funding and performance, as you can see, as our funding has gone down, so is our building performance. You will note on the historical performance chart there that we did make an adjustment to our condition data. So previous to fiscal year 20, we really looked at just the building condition, not its functionality. So beginning in fiscal year 20, we started looking at building functionality specifically for our vehicle storage facilities, which are our most abundant types. So if they can't fit a plow truck, so they're not 20 feet wide and 50 feet deep each bay, and each bay door isn't 16 by 16, then that building isn't serving its purpose. And so we're now facing or looking at more functionality than condition, which is kind of explains the decrease there from fiscal year 19 to 20. Regardless, our condition does seem to be decreasing right along with smaller budgets. Next slide. So our project selection process is pretty straightforward. We work with John Lermay and Marcella to prioritize projects after the budget setting workshop. We allocate 84% of our budget to capital construction and 15% to controlled and deferred maintenance, which we give to the regions, and then 1% to code review. Next slide. Is there a next? Can you? I don't.
Oh, did it not go for you?
No, I don't see it. Maybe.
Toby, are you seeing the next slide?
There we go.
It's there now. Yeah.
So a recap of buildings in fiscal year 22 and 23. We completed 8 vehicle storage facilities, 1 plow port, which is essentially a 3-sided vehicle storage facility. We did 1 10-foot addition on a VSF. We added 1 wash bay to a VSF. We constructed 4 sand sheds. We completed 4 office remodels. And we also completed the Eisenhower exhaust project and roof repairs. Currently, we have 2 VSFs under construction. We have 2 VSFs, 1 in Superior and 1 in Trinidad, that we are remediating at post-fire. We have 1 sand shed, 1 office remodel, and 2 employee housing complexes under construction. Next slide.
Is it still on?
It's just a little bit of a lag, but I think we're getting it. So some impactful upcoming projects for us. Sedgwick is a big one. We are consolidating the Julesburg and Crook patrols into 1 building in Sedgwick. That replaces 1 B building and 3 F buildings. We are building a new building for the ITS group at our Penn Yard location. And that will also include a new building for the Region 1 bridge crew. That essentially combines 4 sites and 5 buildings into 2 buildings at 1 existing site. So we're getting rid of 2 D buildings and 3 F. And then Winter Park and Wolf Creek, these are the worst buildings in our inventory from a sand shed and a VSF perspective. So we're able to give both of them new buildings and new sand sheds. So we're eliminating the 5 worst buildings in our inventory, which is really exciting. Next slide. So our forecast, as you can see, our planning budget is around $15.5 million per year. And the orange line, the target is the blue line, and our planning budget doesn't get us anywhere near that. So, but we're trying. So we're trying to make do with what we have, and we're always trying to find different ways and cheaper ways to improve our buildings. Next slide. So some current pressures for us, construction cost increases are obvious. We're seeing a slight stabilization from COVID, but from fiscal year 21 to 24, we had just over 74% cost increase. So that impacted us a lot. There are some statutory changes that are going to impact our costs. There's some funding changes that could possibly impact our costs. And then some other current pressures are that we tend to focus on the immediate need over a true asset management approach. Did I see a question? No. Okay. Next slide. So some efficiencies for us, we updated our procedural directive, PD 60.1, which was huge for us. Previous to this, the regions really decided how many bays they would get per building. And what we did instead is we said, no, you're going to get 1 bay for each piece of essential equipment. And this was huge for us. For fiscal year 24, we were able to save $3.7 million just by right sizing the buildings. That allowed us to reinstate the Winter Park project, which we had to cancel in fiscal year 18. 25, we reinstated a steamboat project that was canceled in 2022 because of high costs. We pulled Sterling forward, and then we reinstated the Rabbit Ears project that was canceled. And then some other accomplishments for us is we have a new sand shed prototype. We're hoping that'll save us $500,000 per year. And we have a new contracting process for design services, which is anywhere from $75,000 to $100,000 per project. Next slide. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Hope. We're excited now to hear from John Lorme, who is going to talk about plowing snow, striping roads, and other functions of the maintenance program. John?
Well, thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm kind of filling in here for BJ. She's a little under the weather, so you got to bear with me. This is her slide deck. We went over it a couple times, so I'll try to do as much as I can from the notes that I took. So next slide. So these numbers actually add up to 101 because I rounded up my numbers a little bit. Some of the percentages were, the 0.5, so I rounded it up. So it equals 101, but generally it's 100%. And I do love this slide because it shows how much operations with a big O compared to maintenance with a little m is actually what DMO or the maintenance team's about. MLOS is is almost more focused on operating the system than actually maintaining it in a traditional sense. And most people within our department and outside our department don't realize that MLOS is all encompassing. And I hear a lot of complaints or a lot of questions from the public and our stakeholders. Wow, you guys have a $250 to $300 million budget and you can't fix this or that. But really, everything that the maintenance sections do, from toilet paper in their maintenance facilities to replacing a $25,000 transmission and engine setup, or actually that'd be pretty cheap because it's about a $50,000 replacement in a tandem. All that comes out of MLOS. In fact, every single minute of a maintainer's day is paid for out of MLOS. In FY23, we invested 330,000 hours in training, planning, meetings, and inspections. And all of that comes out of one single maintenance program area, and that's MLOS's 100 MPA, and that took about $15 million out of MLOS. Over the last 10 years, the department has raised MLOS about 25 million, or I'm sorry, it's raised it more than 25 million, almost 50 million actually, or 46 million to 300 million in FY25. I know the slides we're going to see in a second show it looks slightly different, but I know it's an incredible accomplishment from our DAF and our EMT teams to increase our MLOS by $46 million over the past 10 years. But these efforts really only help us keep up on the personal services side, and we do lag way behind in operating. And our MLOS budget is divided into those two major categories, and I'll talk more about those in a second. Over the past probably decade or so, the maintenance sections and the traffic sections have really relied on personal services to help cover our operating shortfalls, and we've also requested additional funding through the TC contingency fund. So next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we dedicate an awful lot to operations. 30% of our maintenance and operation budget actually goes to winter operations and traffic incident management. Last year, we spent $113 million, which equates to about 644,000 labor hours in winter operations and another 45,000 labor hours in conducting courtesy assist. Both are focused on mobility and safety in the end, and not really the traditional transportation infrastructure maintenance that you might think of. You know, due to increasing costs in material, labor, operating costs, we're really forced to prioritize the maintenance that we can do, and it's based off of what we can afford. After safety-related issues like traffic signals, potholes, on-highway hazardous incidents, hazardous material incidents, guardrail end treatments, and winter maintenance and traffic incident management, then we really start to focus on infrastructure and equipment preservation, trying to keep the system in a good state of repair. And that's stuff like sign maintenance, surface preservation, when the maintenance sections are doing small patching with lay down machines. So it's a small section of highway. They're not really doing what the engineering and the surface preservation program does on the large scale. Striping, bridge maintenance, keeping the fleet operational, even fixing vandalism repairs that actually cost a lot of money because people think that all our lights don't really need copper wire when they do. So you'd be surprised at how much damage that we have to fix from criminal activity. Then we kind of go into environmental maintenance, which is taking care of our facilities, managing our de-icing with our control systems when it comes to our facilities, stormwater runoffs, highway mowing and noxious weeds, culverts, permanent water quality pond, erosion maintenance, and just to name a few. And then lastly on the list is livability maintenance, if that makes sense. It's kind of off-highway trash litter, graffiti, homeless encampment mediation, and sound walls, and those kind of maintenance tasks. You know, funny enough, after potholes and traffic signal timing, we get more complaints on livability issues than we do on anything else. And it's actually pretty far down on our list of priorities because the livability issues don't really affect mobility, safety and mobility. They're just basically, we live in a beautiful state and we want to keep it that way. So the public's pretty boisterous about that. Next slide. So this is where I kind of get a little off of BJ's stuff, but because we're supplemented funding throughout the year, MLOS is able to maintain our statewide PD14 performance goal of a B-. With the addition of, like this year, we received an additional 35 million in surface preservation, and we can always draw, or we'll always end up drawing on the TC contingency funds. We're able to keep MLOS where we need it to be. Most years, we overachieve in our winter maintenance target, which is a B, and we actually achieve an A minus. So overall, our level throughout the whole state for maintenance is a B minus. It's a bit misleading because our A minus pulls us up and brings our overall letter grade a bit up. But it is important to note that maintenance, when we fall short on maintenance, the public sees it right away. And ironically enough, when July rolls around, the public really only sees weeds, noxious weeds and trash and mowing issues and debris and the usual potholes. They don't really understand the massive effort that goes on behind the scenes to actually execute our winter operations program and all the department's efforts that go through to ensure that the system has year-round mobility, which is almost number one. So next slide. So I mentioned it earlier, our operating continues to climb and outpace our budget increases, and most of our budget increases are focused on the personal services side because we must be able to staff and pay for our employees. In FY23, we spent $26 million on fleet and equipment maintenance and an additional $4.5 million on diesel fuel to keep our fleet running. That's approximately 14% of our budget, just to keep the fleet operating. And even then, we're seeing massive increases in our fleet repair costs, and they're steadily rising since COVID hit. Not only are we suffering from those increases, all of our vendors are also suffering, so they pass that on to us. So our fleet maintenance costs are actually funded out of MLOS, and that continues to rise, and most people don't realize that. What's even more important is and I don't want to steal any thunder from Howard, but traditionally we replace about 40 plows a year, and it really keeps our fleet on a cutting edge, if you will, and it's more efficient. And in the past couple of years, due to cost increase, we've only been able to replace 20 plows. So our maintenance costs continue to rise, and our miles per gallon continues to dip down as our fleet gets older, just trying to keep that fleet operational. So next slide. So we are trying to strike a balance, but it's never easy. Many years ago, and I mean many, many years ago, like over a decade plus, maybe 2 decades ago, the budget was kind of split between a 50-50 between personal services and operating. But personal services costs continue to rise. We keep pulling from operating to cover our personal services. The DAF team and the EMT have really done yeoman's work trying to get our personal services up, but we still do lag behind in our operating costs as our material costs continue to skyrocket. Over the last 4 years, as Toby had mentioned earlier, our buying power continues to decline at a rapid rate. For example, an end treatment, a MASH compliant end treatment now that you might see in the metro area, Smart Cushion, costs about $23,000, $24,000 installed. And just a couple years ago, the non-MASH compliant system before that we would install would be about $1,000 to $2,000. So we're seeing a massive increase in our material costs. Some of the maintenance sections are actually pulling away from personal services just to cover those basic operating costs that they need to. And then we're relying on contingency draws to make ends meet when it comes to our winter operations. Next slide. So the original MOS budget has never really exceeded $300 million when it's budgeted. However, CDOT has invested large sums of money recently, specifically in the last year. As I mentioned, we put $35 million into surface preservation. That's really helped our maintenance teams kind of meet their goal of keeping the highways held together. Additionally, we draw contingency funds, as we always do, from our winter operations side of the house, and that helps cover some of those shortfalls as well. So MLOS will not be able to sustain what the sections need as it is now. The additional funding that we get throughout the year is really important. And I just have to say that it's contingency funds, the surface preservation money, the money that the Chief Engineer's Office through the traffic and safety groups give us and provide us, whether it's end treatments or guardrail or additional funding, the bridge and tunnel enterprise funding that we receive, and we get some reimbursements from that, and our CTIO reimbursements really help us meet these shortfalls and keep delivering what we're supposed to, keeping the public safe and keeping the highways open. So I think that's my last slide, Toby. So I'll turn it back over to you, bud.
Thanks so much for filling in at the last minute, John. Let's now turn in to what in many ways is our largest asset class, and that of course will be pavement, which will be covered by Craig Whedon and Laura Conroy.
Thank you, Toby. Next slide, please. CDOT's pavement asset management program is tasked with maintaining the condition and drivability life of Colorado roadways using a performance-based project selection process. As you can see in the pavement inventory box, we have approximately 23,000 lane miles of state highway. The breakdown is also shown in the box. On the right side of the slide, we have listed some of the reasons that our program is important. These include mobility and accessibility, economic benefits, and maintaining the overall value of the asset. Details can be seen on the slide. Unfortunately, recent increases in paving costs, aging infrastructure, and traffic growth are negatively affecting our surface treatment program. We anticipate that the condition of our pavements will get much worse in the near future if we don't significantly increase our annual pavement budget. Next slide, please. This slide presents the risks of budget shortfalls. First, there are obvious safety risks that you can view on the slide. We want to emphasize a couple of these. The first is deep ruts, which can lead to hydroplaning and increased accidents. This is a prevalent distress on our mountain corridor due to chain wear. Also, deterioration along longitudinal joints can lead to lateral instability of passenger vehicles and motorcycles and has caused accidents. We also want to highlight some of the financial risks associated with budget shortfalls. If there's not enough budget to maintain pavements in a satisfactory condition, they will continue to deteriorate, and when budget does become available, it will cost more to bring the pavements back to a satisfactory condition. Also, if we do not meet the federal pavement condition standards for our interstate pavements, the FHWA could place restrictions on federal funding and usage. The restrictions would entail loss of flexibility in how and where CDOT uses federal funding to the amount of approximately $130 million. This penalty would be assessed until our interstate pavement condition improves. There is also public perception risks. Pavement is a visible sign of how CDOT is functioning as a steward of taxpayer dollars. As the driver experience continues to decline, it negatively impacts CDOT's reputation. Next slide, please. The pavement asset uses drivability life as a metric. Drivability life is an indication in years of how long a highway will have acceptable driving conditions. In accordance with PD 14, our goal is to maintain 80% of our state highway system, the interstate system, and the NHS highways at a high or moderate drivability life. Based on our 2022 data collection, we were at 81% high moderate drivability life for the statewide network. At the bottom of the slide, you can see the drivability life classification breakdown. High drivability life is classified as 11 years or greater. Moderate drivability life is 4 to 10 years, and low drivability life is 3 years and less. In addition to CDOT's drivability life criteria, we are also graded by FHWA using the national performance measures. The bottom right-hand box shows our interstate poor condition based on the national performance measures. A penalty will be imposed if we exceed 5% poor on our interstates. Based on our 2021 pavement condition data, we were tied for 48th place in the nation in terms of percentage of federally poor interstate condition. Next slide, please. This slide presents the historical network performance from 2014 to 2022 in the upper left-hand corner. The green bars represent the percentage of pavements with high drivability life. Yellow bars represent the percentage of pavements with moderate drivability life, and the red bars represent the percentage of pavements with low drivability life. Generally speaking, our percentage of low drivability life roads has remained close to 20% for the past several years. At the bottom of the slide, the historical budget for the pavement asset is shown by year from FY14 to FY27. On average, our funding has essentially shown no increase over the last 14 years.
As you can see in the upper right corner of the slide, we've also listed some of the additional funding sources that benefit the pavement asset. While we are still working to better quantify the value, each funding source can contribute to the pavement asset through projects. Projects that are constructed with these additional funds are subsequently captured in our inventory updates and are then incorporated into our pavement management model. Next slide, please. The project selection and prioritization process involves both headquarters pavement management and region pavement management personnel, beginning with quality review of our annual data collection and generation of the statewide and region models. The regions use their individual region models to generate their own construction strategies using their specific budgets. These construction strategies are the recommendations that provide the highest benefit to cost ratio and result in a potential list of candidate treatments. The regions can then collaborate internally to narrow these down further into a final region list of vetted treatments to fit within their respective budget. When the regions have their final vetted list compiled, it is then sent back to headquarters pavement management to review for budget compliance and then compiled into the final statewide service treatment list. That's where we look at meeting the 80% statewide match criteria. The verification of the 80% statewide match criteria is used to ensure that the majority of those treatments selected by the regions through the asset funding source are those that reflect the highest benefit to cost ratio. In essence, we are ensuring that we are maximizing our investments given the limited funding available. Finally, as projects are completed that improve the pavement asset, either with the surface treatment funds or other funding sources, the pavement management inventory is updated to reflect completed construction, which is then reflected in subsequent model runs completing the process. Next slide, please. Some of the more significant projects for fiscal year 23 that were either completed or are under construction focused on our interstate condition. A listing of those projects is included here. They include a mix of concrete and asphalt rehabilitation projects, as well as maintenance collaboration projects. When all are completed, these projects will have improved approximately 265 lane miles of our interstate and reduced our federal poor interstate percentage by about 0.7%. We've also been working on improvements to our pavement management model, some of which can be seen here on the right-hand side of the slide. Next slide, please. Some of the upcoming key projects can be viewed here, and they will continue to focus on improving our interstate condition. A list of those planned projects can be viewed on the slide. Next slide, please.
We don't have a forecast to show you today, and that's because we're right in the middle of finalizing a presentation on a new estimate that shows a significantly greater funding need. So stay tuned and we'll have more to say about that in the coming months. Next slide, please.
The primary current pressure the pavement asset is facing includes improving our interstate condition. As you heard earlier, we currently have over 3% of our interstate that is federally poor per the national performance measures. And we were tied for 48th in the nation based on our interstate condition in our 2021 data. In an attempt to address that aspect of our network, more emphasis and more of our asset funding is being diverted to projects on the interstate. You can see the increased investment levels by fiscal year in the sub-bullet. I would also point out that these are some of the more expensive projects due to the number of lanes typically seen on the interstate. This is further compounded by the age of our infrastructure, with a lot of our network roadways constructed in the early to mid 1900s and the majority of our interstate built in the 60s and 70s. These roadways have exceeded their design life and many are in need of significant treatment or reconstruction. As you've heard also earlier, we've seen a significant growth in the population here in Colorado, leading to more than a 50% growth or increase in traffic in just the last 10 years on some of our highways. Additionally, we've seen with other assets, overall decrease in bidders on our projects and higher bid prices. In terms of our environment, the elevation of our roadways across the state varies from approximately 3,500 feet at the Kansas border to over 10,000 feet in some of our mountain passes. Commercial vehicles are required to carry chains between September 1st through May 31st, and they frequently are required to use them. The degradation from chain wear seen on our pavements is significant and negatively impacts performance in these mountain corridors. Next slide, please. Just to expand more on the higher prices, we looked specifically at the increase in hot mix asphalt pricing over the last 10 years. Between 2014 and 2020, we saw a relatively minor increase of 11% in hot mix asphalt pricing. But between 2020 and 2022, we saw prices jump by almost 45%. As a result of these and other materials prices increases, our treatment costs on our projects have jumped significantly, which has a direct impact on the number of lane miles treated per year, since our asset funding has been relatively flat or has only seen a marginal increase since 2020. Next slide, please.
We currently have model improvements underway that will help us prioritize investment on interstates and will help us select the proper treatment at the proper time during the pavement life cycle. This will include preventative maintenance treatments on concrete and asphalt pavements. We also want to continue collaborating with maintenance to address critical pavement needs around the state, maximizing benefit with available budgets. We also continue to emphasize bundling with various asset funds to deliver a more comprehensive project benefiting from economy of scale and minimizing impacts to the traveling public. This concludes the pavement presentation.
Thanks, Laura and Craig. Let's now go back to our friend Hope Wright, who's going to cover our newest asset class, which is rest areas.
Okay, next slide. So prior to becoming CDOT's 12th asset in 2018, we had roughly 33 rest areas statewide. 7 of those were closed. Most of those were closed because they needed major repairs to their wastewater treatment systems. 3 of them were close to Denver, and then the others were in either the Eastern Plains or along the I-70 corridor. Today, we sit at an inventory of 26 rest areas statewide. Next slide. So some risks of underfunding rest areas are primarily related to safety and public perception. So as our rest areas deteriorate, fewer people want to stop there, or maybe the wrong people want to stop there, which leads to a rest area that's essentially unusable for a percentage of our traveling public. That leads to negative perception, and it all together leads to a driver fatigue and decreases in safety. So we really want to make sure that rest areas are serving their purpose, which is to allow travelers a place to stop and rest before they get back on the road. And we want our rest areas to be properly maintained so that they reflect positively on the state of Colorado. Next slide. So our metric is percentage of rest areas grade C condition or better. Our target is that we wish to have 90% of our rest areas in grade C condition or better. Next slide. Rest areas performance and funding, as mentioned earlier, we didn't become an asset until 18. We didn't get funding until 2023 because of the budget cycle. Our funding right now seems to be around $4 million, and our historical performance seems to be decreasing right along with our funding. I think that's really all I want to add on this. Next slide. So our project selection process for rest areas is exactly identical to buildings. So I won't bore you with that. Next slide. Some fiscal year 23 recap. Under construction currently, we have the Vail Pass rest area. That's expected to be completed fall of this year. We also have the Edwards exterior lighting project, which was a safety improvement. In design currently, we have 3 rest areas that we needed to immediately address ADA issues. And those include Shaw Creek, which will be a full replacement. Araba and Holly are getting interior remodels. We're doing an HVAC upgrade in Colorado City. And as you can see on the right side, we are going to be replacing the wastewater treatment systems in 3 of the rest areas in Glenwood Canyon. Due to the cost, we can only replace 1 per year. And then we'll go back through the canyon and start replacing rest area buildings. That also allows for just 1 closure of each rest area in the canyon each year. Next slide. So our rest area condition forecast, we're still working through our model. We're not quite sure what's going on with that blip. I think what it has to do with is that a rest area is very expensive. It takes multiple years of funding to fund 1 rest area replacement, and the model just can't predict that. So it keeps going back to the same treatments on the same rest areas. So we are working with Jeff to refine this. Next slide. Current pressures, exactly the same as buildings. We're really focusing on immediate need over our a true asset management process. There's potential to have a funding shift, which could impact us negatively. And there are some statutory changes that will impact our costs. And the big one for rest areas is that our yearly budget doesn't cover the cost of one project. So every project becomes multiple year project. Next slide. Some efficiencies. We had some functional improvements with wastewater, ADA, and safety. We also had some LED light fixture conversions, low flow fixture conversions. We have finally have a rest area prototype. So Shaw Creek and Vale are the two rest areas that will have this new prototype. And we are pursuing partnerships. Right now, 3 of our rest areas are managed by the State Tourism Office, and we are pursuing opportunities for them to potentially manage 3 more. We also are pursuing some sponsorship programs at our rest areas that could provide some additional funding. And I think that's it for that slide. Next one. Good.
Thank you, Hope. I'm liking these quick presentations. Our next speaker also manages multiple assets, and that person is Natasha Butler, who is going to kick off the first of her 3 presentations today with walls. Natasha?
Thanks, Toby. Next slide. So I'm going to start off with our culverts program, and CDOT's culvert program is for minor structures. It inspects, maintains, repairs, rehabs, and replaces these minor structures. And these are culverts and bridges with spans between 4 and 20 feet. Now, the majority of this asset class are culverts, so that's why we kind of overarchingly call them culverts. We have about 6,000 statewide. And the importance of these, they create efficient roadway paths and they allow for more natural waterway flow. Next slide. Some risks of not funding our culverts. We really saw these risks in real life last spring during some larger runoff events, as you can see with the Somerset culvert failure here. So our condition of some of these culverts, which I'll get into later, really worsens when we don't address deterioration while rehabs are still possible. And on the financial side, if we don't address things early, it costs us more in the long run. As far as safety, there's increased probability and consequences of culvert failure during and after weather events. And public perception, as you can see in this photo here of the Somerset culvert failure, we had to close down the roadway and create a detour route for the traveling public. So that's really obvious and concerning for the public. Next slide. Now, taking a look at our PD14 metric, our metric is the percentage of culverts that are in not poor condition. Now, all of our culverts are rated on a scale from 0 to 9. 4 or less is considered poor condition, 5 or 6 is fair condition, 7 and above is good condition. Our target is 95% of our culverts in not poor condition. We're currently performing at 94.5%, which looks pretty good, but let's go to the next slide. So if you take a look at our historical performance of good, fair, and poor culverts and our prediction, there are a couple of things that I want to point out on this chart. So the first is that in 2020, we started to see an increase of our fair culverts outweighing our percentage of good culverts. Even though, we're doing fairly well with our metric, meeting our target, really close to it anyhow, right? That represents a concern on the asset management side of things, because we know that it's more expensive to maintain a fair asset in fair condition than it is to maintain a good asset in good condition. And that's kind of what our model shows us if you start looking into those outer years, right? So we're doing pretty well for a while, but eventually those percentage of fair culverts catch up to us and they start dropping off into poor condition. And with our flat budgets, we aren't able to get ahead of the problem. I will say that in addition to our culvert program, MLOS also performs maintenance on our culverts as well. Next slide. So our project selection process, we start with the inventory and condition data. We prioritize our culverts based on a number of different factors, including condition, mobility, and other scores. And then we send that to the regions. And for the most part, the regions typically select their list of projects from the list of culverts with open essential repair findings, so kind of highest criticality at the time. But it's a collaboration between staff bridge, region project delivery staff, and region hydraulic to ultimately come up with the projects. Next slide. So just a little recap of what was performed in FY23. You can see that we had a replacement, some linings, and overall kind of an even split between maintenance, reconstruction, and rehabilitation for FY23. Next slide. So getting into current pressures, this is where, even though we're almost meeting our PD14 metric, we've seen a real issue with culverts with open essential repair findings. A lot of folks also refer to these as critical culverts. So these are culverts with repair needs identified during inspections that are deemed essential by the inspection engineer. This could be corrosion of a CMP, which I'm going to get into in a little bit. It could be a failing wing wall. It could be silter debris accumulation that's reducing hydraulic capacity. Now, what we've noticed in kind of evaluating these culverts with the open essential repair findings is that more than half of these critical culverts are corrugated metal pipes with some level of deterioration. And we have these broken out into 5 different phases, starting with phase 1, corrosion. You start getting then perforations in the invert of your pipe. That starts piping and soil movement away from the outside of the pipe. And because these pipes are flexible, they rely on a soil structure interaction to maintain their shape. So when you start getting voids around the structure, the pipe starts deforming, and eventually it can collapse and fail, just like we saw in the Somerset culvert failure. So what we know is that if we can get ahead of this problem and line these culverts earlier in phase 1 through 3, it's a much lower cost to extend the service life of these structures before they get to deformation and collapse and failure, where we have to go out and replace them, oftentimes in an emergency basis. Next slide. So looking at future projects, you can see over on the right is the map of the projects with the FY25 asset management culvert funding. We have a nice scatter of rehab, maintenance, and reconstruction across the state. In fall of 2023, we received $65 million in federal redistribution funds allocated by Transportation Commission to address high-risk corrugated metal pipes. So those CMPs that I was just talking about with deterioration. Now, these funds are currently being programmed and placed into projects at a very rapid pace. So plans are kind of changing all the time. But initially, what we're projecting is that the funds are going to repair or replace around 60 poor minor culverts. So that will help us meet our target for percentage for our PD14 metrics. And one thing I want to note about these is that they aren't dedicated to just our minor structures. They're also allowed to be used for non-qualifying structures, so culverts less than 48 inches in diameter. And I think a lot of the regions are taking advantage of that, which is great because those are kind of an unfunded asset. Next slide. Some efficiencies. So like I noted, right, we know that if we can get out and line our culverts in earlier stages, it costs us a lot less and we can extend the life of these structures. Region 1 recently put out a project with concrete mat invert lining, and I think bids came back something like 40% under the original estimate. So we're really hopeful with these efficiencies that we're implementing to try to get ahead of the risks that these corrugated metal pipes are posing to our roadways. Next slide. Great, I'm just gonna bounce right into walls. Next slide. So CDOT's wall program consists of retaining walls, bridge walls, and noise walls. Now, bridge walls, these are walls that specifically contribute, retaining walls that contribute to the structural stability of the bridge. And our noise walls are the ones, you know, along the roadway, blocking noise and pollution from surrounding residences. We have around 3,000 walls statewide. Next slide. Risk of budget shortfalls. So again, you know, not performing routine preventative maintenance, cleaning out drains, getting water away from our walls results in more expensive rehab treatments. Damaged retaining walls that support our roadways can pose a risk to the traveling public. And, you know, our noise walls and many retaining walls are visible to the public, and we get calls on them saying, hey, you know, these blocks are deteriorating. We're seeing soil and water coming through the wall here. You know, what are you guys doing to fix it? Next slide. So our metric for walls, similar to culverts, is percentage of walls that are by square footage that are not poor condition. Our current performance is 96.7%. Our target is 97.5%. So again, we're really close to our target there. And as you can see, our walls are rated similarly to culverts on a scale from 0 to 9. Again, 4 and less is poor, 5 and 6 is fair, 7 and above is good condition. Next slide. So taking a look at historical and future performance, you can see that, you know, it looks like our walls are doing pretty well for a while, at least out until about 2029. I'll get into a little bit of a breakdown on this in a little bit. But one of the things that I want to point out on this graph is that our wall program is still relatively new and relatively new nationwide. So trying to predict the performance of our walls, I think we're going to hone in on that a little more as years go by and we get more historical data on how our walls are actually performing. Next slide. So the project selection process, we start with our inventory and condition data. As far as prioritization, right now we're really looking at those walls with open essential repair findings and any additional needs identified by the regions. We collaborate, there's a collaboration between staff bridge and region staff to determine the final project selection. Next slide. So the FY23 projects recap, kind of an interesting one. You don't typically think of, at least I don't think of scour with our walls, but we had a scour repair in FY23. And then Region 5 is doing a reconstruction on this wall on 145. So you can see that most of our walls are being rehabilitated, and a small portion of the budget goes to reconstruction. Due to the kind of limited amount of this funding, the projects are typically multi-year funding projects. Next slide. So future projects, you can see we've got a scattering statewide. As I mentioned, you'll notice that wall in Region 5 is still underway in the upcoming years due to the complexity and cost of it and the budget there. There's a wall on I-70 that you can, it's kind of difficult to see in this photo, but it supports I-70 very closely, and we've got some blocks coming out of it. So that's being rehabbed as well. Next slide. So current pressures. One of the things that we noticed is that when we break noise walls away from our performance of retaining and bridge walls, we noticed that our percentage of poor noise walls were really driving our overall performance and targets. And a big reason for this is that there are a lot of timber noise walls in Region 1 that were not performing very well. And you can see between 2022 and 2023, that percentage in blue has actually dropped by quite a bit. There were some stimulus funds that were allocated toward those walls. And so that's a really good to see for our noise walls. Next slide.
Thank you so much, Natasha. We're now going to turn to traffic signals, which is going to be covered by Nitin Deshpande. Nitin?
Yep. Thank you, Toby. Next slide, please. All right, overview of the signal assets. So CDOT owns approximately 19 traffic signals statewide at a replacement value of $1.4 billion. Half of those signals are located in Region 1, and majority of the signals are located along the Front Range. Signal asset is also unique from the operation and maintenance perspective, as half of these signals are managed by CDOT in-house, while the other half is being managed by the local agencies under the CDOT maintenance contracts. As for the asset condition, 87% of the signal infrastructure is in good or fair condition, and approximately 7.5% is in need of replacement. The cost of replacing a signalized intersection is approximately $750,000, which reflects a 30 to 40% increase in construction costs in just a few years. Next slide, please. Thank you. The importance in risk. Traffic signals are important because these are considered regulatory devices, and non-compliance with the federal standards may result in loss of federal aid funds. Traffic signals provide for orderly, safe, and efficient movement of traffic, minimizing vehicle conflicts and improving safety and mobility along the corridor. Properly timed signals also reduce vehicle emissions and improve air quality. The risk of neglecting upkeep can lead to safety and mobility issues, obsolete technology, and increased maintenance costs. Next slide, please. Right, as per the performance measure for traffic signal, it is the percentage of signal infrastructure in severe condition. The current performance is at 7%, meaning there is 7% signal infrastructure out there that is in need of replacement. The target performance is 2%, meaning there is a 5% point gap in asset performance at this point. The table to the right shows traffic signal infrastructure condition by region. As a strategy, the signal program focused on those low-cost, high-value component replacements in the beginning, and we're now focused on signal assemblies that are in need of replacement, which is a high dollar value item. Next slide, please. Funding and performance. This slide shows the historic budget allocations and corresponding asset performance. The signal asset was funded at approximately $15 million on average between fiscal year 17 and fiscal year 21. However, the funding levels have decreased beginning fiscal year 22, and as a result, the asset performance is expected to worsen in the future years. Next slide, please. Okay, as for the project selection process, we leverage the signal inspection data from Stockbridge, the video imageries, and the maintenance work orders that are logged in SAP to assign a condition rating to each device. The key considerations are structural integrity for the assemblies and the functional or technological obsolescence for cabinets and controllers. About 3% of the budget is reserved for emergency replacements. As for the project selection and prioritization process, the latest updated signal inventory is run through the AIMS model for financial scenario analysis. The signal program then works collaboratively with the region staff in reviewing planning budget allocations and treatment recommendations to develop a prioritized list of treatments. Next slide, please. Right, the typical signal replacement projects include replacing the existing pole and mast arm signals or span wire signals due to the structural integrity issues, and replacing cabinets and controllers due to the technological obsolescence. Next slide, please. This graph shows the signal asset condition forecast. The current performance is at about 7.5%, which is represented by the orange line. The performance target is 2%, which is represented by the blue line. With the current planning budget allocation, the future performance will be around 6% or below over the next 10 years. At that point in time, around 2034, a significant number of signal assemblies will begin reaching the end of their useful life, and the worsening of asset performance is expected. Next slide, please. All right, the current pressures include significant increase in construction costs and signal technology costs. Construction costs have gone up by 40%, and signal technology vendors are competing with the auto industry now for the electronic components. Also, the Buy America, Build America Act has domestic sourcing requirements for iron and steel and manufacturing products such as fiber optics. So that has resulted in material delays and increased construction costs as well. As a result, we are backfilling projects that have budget shortfall, and the treatment list that we identified on the 4-year plan will be impacted as well. Next slide, please. As for the efficiencies, as I mentioned earlier, the signal program initially focused on those low-cost, high-value technological improvements, such as upgrading our cabinets and controllers. We now have deployed advanced transportation controllers that have future connected and autonomous vehicle integration capabilities. Also, the communication with other third-party devices is now possible. The central signal control system that we have deployed allows for remote monitoring and control of most of our signals, and also shows system health using those performance dashboards. The automated traffic signal performance measures, which is a module within the central system, is also being used for proactive operation and maintenance management. We also recently rolled out a preventative maintenance app in Vision 1, 2, and 3 that allows the signal technicians to electronically record the preventative maintenance performed at an intersection, minimizing the device failure probabilities. The user benefits to CDOT, it includes targeted and proactive signal operation and maintenance activities, and remote management and remote troubleshooting of our signals. User benefit to the traveling public is reduction in delay and stop time, and increase in average speed, and improved travel time reliability on our corridors. I guess that concludes the signal asset presentation.
Thank you, Nitin. Let's turn to Howard Ray right now, who's going to talk about CDOT's fleet.
Sorry, I was trying to find the buttons. Right buttons to hit. Give me a second. All right, next slide. Sorry, I lost the slide deck. Can you guys hear me all right? Yep. All right.
Yep, you're good.
Okay. So as you can see in this slide, the pictures at the top of this slide show fleet, the tools that the maintenance and sections need to maintain all the other assets in the town. The fleet's divided into two. So we have what we call the white, which is 250 trucks and below, more for admin purposes. And then we have the heavy fleet, which is everything F350, which is the troll ton, and our orange fleet is on the fleet that is included into the dam. The data points on this slide are what we use to help manage and measure the health of the fleet. There's a couple of these data points that will go through the. One of those is the impacts of the delivery schedule, currently 24 months, which is down in 2020. We were getting trucks delivered and completed. And the annual fleet maintenance cost, as John mentioned, is talk a little bit about that. Readiness rates, we'll talk about how that's the funding and the budget shortfalls are impacting our readiness rates, and the average the fleet. No data point says the average age is kind of between 11 and 12 years. The plow trucks that we were replacing on the current replacement plan are more in the 25-year range. Bottom ribbon, we'll kind of get into that in a little more detail, but it's at the bottom on how our process works for our of asset replacement. Next slide, please.
Hey Howard, can you turn off your video? Maybe we'll
Yes.
get a better signal from you.
That'll work. Maybe. Well, I don't know what it did to get back to that slide. I couldn't get it figured out. Hang on. No. Finally. Is that better?
Let's try it. Go
Okay.
ahead.
All right. So this slide kind of shows some of the shortfalls of the budget. You guys can see here our operational readiness rate, which determines how well the maintenance forces can perform their jobs with the tools. So anything below 80% or above is our target. Anything below 80% means we are ineffective at performing our duties. So for example, if plow trucks are below 80%, then we don't have enough plow trucks to meet our targets as far as removal operations go. And we are this year versus the last time we briefed it, we were actually on 9%. And we actually had 3 of the maintenance sections that fell below the 80% due to maintenance issues with plow trucks. So, and these are issues that would have been replaced, should have been replaced if they hadn't been 25 years old. And we'll kind of get into the detail on how we measure the useful life on another slide. So also our increased maintenance cost, we're having to make decisions to do repairs, again, typically that we wouldn't do if we were replacing our equipment at our correct replacement cycle. And we've also, as a result, John kind of mentioned, now I've got another slide that'll show that we've gone from 40 plow trucks to being able to buy 20 plow trucks. And that's kind of just keeps increasing our backlog based on not being able to replace the equipment in a timely manner. Which kind of provides, kind of puts the sections in a situation where they're operating unsafe equipment. A couple of these pictures, the first picture on the left shows an engine and kind of the cost of engines. And some of these older trucks are even getting to the point where we're having trouble finding engines for them due to their age and due to EPA requirements and moving forward. The second picture from the left, that is actually a hole in a floorboard from the floorboard being rotted out, and patrols are kind of left coming up with used signs and sticking those in the floorboard to where they can operate the equipment. The third picture over is actually a cracked frame. At the beginning of the snow season this year, November, October, we had at least 20 trucks that were down because of these cracked frames. And then the last picture on the far right is maybe kind of hard to see, but that's actually where that circle is somebody's hand between the firewall, the engine compartment, and the cab interior. And again, these guys are pretty creative with using spray foam, sign material, and everything else to kind of do ad hoc repairs to make the trucks get through and be able to do their jobs with them. All right, next slide, please. All right, our fleet metric, this is how we come up with our fleet metric. The target is the fleet average of useful life, and that's the percent of the vehicle life that's been expended. Our target is 75% or below, so the lower the average percentage means the newer equipment is, and the lower is better. So the way we come up with that useful life is the little graph at the bottom of the little chart in the lower left-hand corner, that is actually out of our heavy fleet protocol. And this dictates on the age that we are expected to replace equipment and also the usage that we're expected to replace equipment. So the age and usage, that annual life use plan, the column all the way to the right in the column, shows that the age and the based on usage, when this equipment would start to deteriorate and start to cost us more money to operate. So that's how we come up with each of those life and planned use. And then the graph at this over to the right of that shows how we come up with our percent use and percent age, and then we divide that, and that's how we come up with our useful life. Next slide. All right, this slide shows how we select our projects. So we start out with this. We pull age, usage, 5 years of maintenance cost, and we send all of that to Dayton, and they run it in the model. We pull the 5 years of maintenance cost because the algorithm in the DTEMs should look at and predict increases in maintenance costs and move those to the plan. We also, if the sections have where they know they've got projected maintenance costs, like they know they need to replace a transmission or an engine, they provide those costs to us, and we include that up front when they run the plan, when Dayton runs the plan for that. We have had a couple based on those projected maintenance costs that have moved those to the top of the suggested treatment list. Step 3 in there is kind of how we break down the budget. 50% of the budget goes towards essential equipment, which is snow removal equipment and the large size aerial bucket trucks. And then everything else breaks out below there. Every category or class code category will fall into one of these groups, and every class code category has a expected life and expected usage. Step 4 for us, that is where the sections have the opportunity to take something that they feel is in better shape off the recommended list and add another piece of equipment. We call it in lieu of. And maybe they've just put an engine in a plow truck and it hit the replacement plan, and they want to get more usage out of it. And they have an older truck that is in worse shape, so they'll move that to the top of the list. We've had where they've had a piece of equipment they really don't need, but they need something else. A Mini X is the biggest example I can think of. So they may say, hey, we want to turn this piece of equipment class code in and get a different class code. And all that goes through the Equipment Maintenance Advisory Committee. There's representation on that committee from every section that has equipment in the fleet. And then they come together and kind of help us make the best decision on how to spend the money for equipment replacements. And once all that's done, then it goes to John, Director of Operations, for final approval. Next slide, please. All right, kind of a little bit of a recap on what we've been going through with the fleet. The graph to the left kind of shows the impacts of inflation from 2020 to 24. Our plow cost have increased by 33%. I've got a slide towards the end that kind of showed the actual cost in dollars. And then again, like John said, our budget's kind of stayed the same, but our equipment cost has definitely increased, which has driven us down from 40 plows to 21 plows over the time. We've been working on data collection improvements. Part of this is to get us a better, accurate picture of the actual health of the fleet. And we also report on a national metric with the EMTSP, which is the fleet manager side of AASHTO. And kind of, I'll get into a little bit on that metric, but it shows, this chart shows how many vehicles we have that are beyond the expected useful life and the cost to get those, what it would take to bring everything into that 12-year, because these are plow trucks, would be 12 years or 216,000 miles. And so we're getting better information on that. We have been working towards meeting the governor's goals on greening the fleet, electrifying the light fleet. Recently passed executive order want to electrify lawn maintenance equipment, as well as the advanced clean truck strategy is being developed now. As part of that, we were able to receive a grant for mowing equipment, and we were able to buy, these are 3 all-electric zero-turn riding mowers for lawn maintenance of a couple of headquarters, a couple regional headquarter facilities. Next slide, please. All right, this is some of our key projects coming up, and it's all geared towards trying to improve the health of the fleet with what we have. So we're looking to enhance the preventive maintenance program. One, since the fleet is aging, we're trying to come up with a way to ensure that equipment is lasting as long as we're having to keep it. We're also looking into using predictive maintenance to try and detect failures before they become major problems. We're able to do that through some of our Geotab technology. We're looking to leverage the telematics we get out of Geotab to improve some of our data integrity. This also helps with maintenance on the snow removal, where we're able to get material usage data through the de-icer control systems. And we're also looking to automate equipment usage to take out the human factor in the data that we're using for our replacement plan system with Dayton. So we're looking to improve the accuracy of that. We're continuing to look at greenhouse gas reduction opportunities without impacting operational readiness, such as electric forklifts. This is also a picture of a hybrid aerial lift fan that Staff Bridge uses to inspect bridges. Those do come with a little higher cost over traditional conventional engine, but I've got some slides where we show we've made some headway on using these hybrid technologies, and also looking to continue to work on our EV charging goals and develop a long-term and implementation plan and find sustainable funding to support those efforts. So it's kind of funny because we're being directed to support this, but there's really no funding right now that's a dedicated funding to help support those efforts. Next slide, Toby, or Nathaniel, sorry. All right, this is our Ames curve. It's kind of interesting. I've been watching this over the past couple of years. Last year's, there was a drastic drop in the actual curve this year. So last year showed us dropping below our target in like 2028. This year's curve shows us dropping below our target in 2025. So it's a 3 or 4 different change, and that's all due to the increases in equipment costs that we've seen over the last few years. All right, next slide. All right, some of our current pressures. Again, we talked about the CDOT, the budget, and only being able to replace half of what our forecasted replacements based on the last couple of years. And it's kind of starting to see with those 20 plow trucks with the cracked frames, we're starting to see a disruption to the maintenance section's ability to provide services. The AASHTO EMTSP National Performance Metric, we finally, now that we're able to get data, this is a metric based on following our replacement plan recommendations. And as you can see here, we're red in all areas on this. And then continuing to support the greenhouse gas initiatives. We have the first 2 heavy sweepers, Class 7 sweepers. The cost for those is actually increased more than that now that we anticipate, but to go all battery electric, not counting the infrastructure, is at least double the cost of its internal combustion engine counterpart. And then the infrastructure funding to support those. All right, next slide. All right, here's the pressures we talked about, increasing cost. So these are some of the major pieces of equipment. The plow truck is the biggest one. And from 20 to 24, we've seen the cost increase by 125,000. And that's not counting what we were anticipating 2025, which we just rebid. So we're not sure where that one's going to fall in. Street sweepers are a big one. I've got a couple sections that have some street sweepers that are pushing beyond that 25-year age that they need replaced for various reasons, for safety reasons. And you can kind of see the difference in the cost on those. And then attenuator trucks, the cost on those, and those are critical safety items that we need for the patrols. So next slide. All right, so these slides show some of the efficiencies. It's not all gloom and doom. We have been seeing some positives to some of the things that we've been doing. The first slide here shows in the green is the newer trucks, 2018 and newer, and then the yellow is the older trucks. So we've seen a 5% improvement over fuel efficiency between the newer trucks and the older trucks, which helps, which is how we were able to actually meet our greenhouse gas reduction targets through the newer technology versus the older technology. All right, next slide. All right, this slide shows two different strategies that we used for idle reduction and greenhouse gas reduction. The first one is our truck-mounted attenuators. We installed solar panel with spare batteries so that when they are sitting in a work zone, they're not idling. They'll use the battery and the solar panels to run the lights, message board, and everything else. And then the other one is actually our hybrid aerial lift trucks, and those are actually technically plug-in hybrids because they have a battery pack that you plug in to charge, and while they're working, they run all the hydraulics off of the battery system. And we've seen 17% improvement in fuel economy on the attenuator trucks and a 29% fuel economy on the aerial bucket trucks versus their traditional ICE non-hybrid counterparts. Toby, I think that's all I have, like my last slide. So.
Thanks so much, Howard, especially calling in from on the road. Let's go back to Natasha Butler for one last time to talk about bridges.
All right, don't tell my other assets, but this one might be my favorite. Next slide. So our bridge program addresses bridges and culverts with spans greater than 20 feet. Now, kind of like our culverts, most of these assets are bridges. Our bridges compose 32 million square feet of deck area versus our culverts compose 3 million square feet of deck area. CDOT owns around 3,500 major structures. The importance of these structures, right, they're all about connection, efficient transit in metro areas, access to remote communities. In areas like Glenwood Canyon, we were able to construct bridges for less environmental impact to the landscape. And like our other assets in Staff Bridge, we rate our bridges on a scale from 0 to 9. This is actually the National Bridge Inventory rating scale, where 4 or less is poor condition, 5 or 6 is fair condition, and 7 and above is good condition. Next slide. Now, risks of not funding these assets, not performing preventative maintenance results in faster deterioration. I've got a great slide on that a little bit later. As far as safety, not addressing our scour critical bridges can lead to increased probability of failure due to weather. Scour is the leading cause of bridge failures, and luckily we haven't seen that in CDOT, but that's kind of what we were seeing with our culverts, right? So it's something we keep an eye on really closely. There's also essential repairs such as falling concrete on our structures. Financially, FHWA really looks at these bridges. So if our bridges that are on the NHS exceed federal requirements, so if more than 10% of the deck area on the national highway system is greater than 10%, FHWA can step in and tell us how we have to apportion our federal funding. We lose flexibility in that funding. Delays in repairing damaged joints or deck membranes can lead to greater funding needs in the future. And then, the public is driving over and under our bridges daily. So potholes, road closures, detours, poor joints, these all affect and impact CDOT's image negatively. Next slide. So we have a lot of metrics and targets for bridges. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this slide. You can see we have it broken down into 3 different categories: condition, preservation, and risk mitigation. Now, condition is kind of our lag metric. Preservation is our lead metric, meaning that what we would expect to see is that if we're meeting our targets for preservation or our lead metrics, then our lag metrics should follow, and we should start meeting those targets as well. As far as our lag metrics are concerned, we have it broken down into two categories: CDOT owned versus those bridges that are on the national highway system. We obviously at CDOT care about the bridges that we own. FHWA cares about the bridges that are on the national highway system. CDOT owns most of those, but some of those are also owned by local agencies. So the deck area of poor CDOT owned bridges, our target is less than 10%. We're currently performing at 4.4%. Deck area of good CDOT owned bridges, our target is to keep that above 40%. We're currently performing at 35.5%. I've got a slide on this to talk about that a little more in depth. You'll see the same trends for those on the national highway system. Getting into our lead metrics, we take a look at leaking expansion joints by length. Our target is to keep less than 20%, 26% of our joints in leaking condition. You can see that's we're currently performing at 46.5%, and that trend is just increasing over time. Now, on the other hand, we're doing pretty well with our deck area that is unsealed. So our target is to have less than 35% of our deck area unsealed, and we're currently performing at 32.3%, and you can see that that's trending down. Now, getting into risk mitigation, this is where we're looking at things like scour critical bridges, height restricted and load restricted structures. I'm not going to get too in depth with those metrics, but you can see that we're meeting we're not currently meeting those targets, but we are trending in the right direction with those. Next slide. So why is bridge preservation important, right? This gets back to those lead and lag metrics that I was talking about. So this picture is really great. What you can see is we've got a joint at the top, right? It started leaking and it started allowing water in onto our girders, girder ends. They started corroding. That water continued down onto the bearings and the pier cap. Water is really our number one enemy with a lot of these assets, aside from, you know, oversized semis crashing into them, but I'm not going to get into that now. And, you know, at the end of the day, as we continue to allow this deterioration to move down the bridge, it represents a higher cost to actually repair that structure. Next slide.
Is it not pulling up for you?
It did. Thank you. It's just a little bit of a lag. All right. So, you know, I really like to break down the data that we get from AIMS or DTIMS and look at the full picture. So not just looking at our percentage of poor deck area, but I like to look at the percentage of good deck area, fair deck area, and poor deck area to really get that whole picture, right? And, you know, one of the trends, again, it's a common theme with me. You'll notice that our percentage of fair deck area has begun to rapidly outweigh our percentage of good deck area. And that's a risk for asset management because the goal of this program is to maintain our existing assets, and it's more expensive to maintain a fair structure in fair condition than it is to maintain a good structure in good condition. And you can see that we have BTE, which I believe there's a few slides after I'll be done here, that came in around 2009, and they really started chipping away at that percentage of poor deck area, and they've done a great job with that. They've done a great job at ensuring that we're staying under that federal measure. So what we really focus on with this program are those bridges in good and fair condition. And you can see with a static budget that even BTE is going to be facing larger problems in the future as our percentage of poor deck area begins to creep up on that 10% in 2042. Next slide. So aside from, you know, funding issues, one of the pressures that we're definitely noticing kind of, I would say statewide, I think it's a common theme I've seen with our assets is age. You know, our inventory is aging and it's our responsibility to maintain our current structures. And you know, as structures get older, they inevitably deteriorate. We have some outliers, some great CBCs out there that are doing really well in their older age, but it's something that we're keeping an eye on. Next slide. So our project selection process for Bridge is pretty involved and detailed. You know, we start with the inventory and condition data. We work really closely with Bridge Enterprise and their prioritization plan. As far as our prioritization, what we're really looking at is prioritizing structures that are in good and fair condition, taking a look at those conditions, mobility, safety, and economic scores, to really start prioritizing structures that need things like joint replacements and deck rehabs, membrane overlays. So those prioritization scores are used to allocate the planning budget percentages to the regions, and then they're sent to the regions. And we have an entire program that actually pulls in the surface treatment project selection lists, overlays our prioritization scores, and so we bundle our work with surface treatment to gain some economy of scale out of what we're performing with these preventative maintenance projects. So at the end of the day, our regional folks work with Bridge Enterprise and surface treatment to bundle those projects, and those are the regions ultimately decide on what gets delivered. Next slide. So our FY23 recap, you know, it's asset management, right? So we're not doing big, sexy bridge replacements. We're doing the bread and butter deck pans, overlays, joint replacements. You can see that the majority of the budget went to maintenance. We had some reconstruction and a little bit of rehab as well with our FY23 budget. Next slide. So some key upcoming projects, we have deck replacements. You can see bearing and deck repair that we're planning on advertising in the next year. You can see by the map that most of the work being performed is categorized as kind of maintenance work, right? So maintaining our existing structures. Next slide. Some efficiencies. So, you know, I think we've noticed this with almost every asset, right? We have a limited amount of funding, so we're trying to get creative in how we deliver that funding to best maintain our inventory. And so a couple of things that we've done in Staff Bridge. The first one is timber bridge repairs. We came up with a new repair design for our timber bridges with split timber girders. The idea behind this design is that it's going to be more robust and prevent maintenance from having to make repeat trips out to these structures to repair them. They should be moved from poor to at least fair condition. It also removes load restrictions on these structures. So we're working with the freight office to get some of these funded as well. Aside from that, we have a fatigue crack retrofit project. So we've really started noticing an uptick in some fatigue cracks on our steel structures. Now, fatigue cracks are cracks that are identified in steel superstructures that are of concern because once these cracks reach a certain point, they can cause abrupt failure of that component or that element on the structure. And so there was a little bit of funding dedicated to this last year. Region 1 is working on delivering a project to address these structures. And a lot of these structures are poor because of fatigue cracks. So by addressing these fatigue cracks, we're going to be moving those out of poor condition. Next slide. And I think I'll hand it to Catherine.
Yeah, hi everyone. So Katie Carlson with Bridge and Tunnel Enterprise. So we're just going to kind of tag on to what Natasha was presenting. So kind of take a step back. So the enterprise was formed back in 2009 as part of the larger, faster legislation. And our purpose at that time, and it still is really to replace and rehab the poor bridges. As Natasha was explaining, those poor bridges are 4 and below on, that was the red area that she was showing on that National Bridge Inventory Rating Scale. And then we've also had some legislation since 2009 that has changed our program and also expanded our scope. So everyone's pretty familiar with Senate Bill 21-260. So that expanded the program to include tunnels. And then we also had some legislation during 2003. So House Bill 23-1276. It's also known as like our funding flexibility bill. So this is giving us some flexibility in our funding to be able to focus on preventative maintenance projects for bridges, and then also to do some bundling where if we've got a poor bridge, rather than having to go back out and wait for a bridge to become poor, like a sister bridge that's currently fair to become poor, we can kind of address both of those at the same time. And then I also wanted to point out that as an enterprise, we're a little different from CDOT. Our statute allows us to, we can impose fees. So the first one that most people are pretty familiar with is that bridge safety surcharge. So that is part of your registration. You'll see it on your vehicle registration. And that was part of the 2009 FASTER legislation. Senate Bill 260 introduced 2 new funding sources for us. So that's going to be the bridge and tunnel impact fee and then the retail delivery fee. We also have the ability to issue revenue bonds. We're currently in the process of doing that right now. And then we can also enter into agreement loans and grants. On average, when you kind of look at our capital construction program as a whole, we've got about 117 million that we have dedicated to those bridges that are poor specifically for the next 4 years. So FY24 through FY27. Next slide. Okay, perfect. So on the left side, you're going to see these are some of the big projects that we're working on. You guys are probably familiar with a lot of these. We've also got some other 10-year plan projects on here as well, and some of our safety critical bridges. And so some of the big achievements that we've had since the program has started is we executed originally when the program started a $300 million bond program. So we addressed 89 of the poor bridges. We've also been able to address a lot of the poor deck bridge area. So we've completed over 2.2 million square feet. A good portion of that was actually the Central 70 project, so the viaduct. And then we've also been able to budget quite a bit to these projects as well. So we've got 250 million budgeted, and we've got approximately about $1 billion committed to our bridges and tunnels within the 10-year plan. Next slide. Okay, so this is going to be our final slide before I hand it over to the tunnel section. So part of Senate Bill 260, it helped us direct our funding and our purpose to really focus on 10-year planning projects. And so in order to deliver the 10-year plan projects that we have, BTE is currently facing a funding gap. So we've kind of looked at our out years, we've looked at our cash flow, and we are currently right now, in order to kind of deliver on everything that we need to, we have a $420 million funding gap. So as I mentioned before, we are able to enter into, or we're able to issue revenue bonds. And so we're currently in the middle of a financing plan right now that'll allow us to help address some of the funding gaps. It's not going to be a one-time thing. We're kind of having to go back in subsequent fiscal years and kind of right size to our construction program. So it's going to be a multi-year process, and we're working with the regions and all the project teams to really address those needs. But when you're talking about taking on funding, of course, you've got to be able to pay for the debt service that's associated with that. So we're going to have an increase in our debt service, which means our available cash or our pay-go capacity is going to be reduced. So we do have to balance between like what can we take on and address these larger projects up front versus, you know, what can we not address when the pay-go is being decreased. And then lastly, we just wanted to point out with the new House Bill 1276, that was that funding flexibility bill where it allowed us to bundle bridges and then also work on some fair rated bridges. That one did expand our scope for the program, but it did not provide any additional funding. So that's another constraint that we're working with as well. Next slide.
Thank you, Natasha and Katie. We're going to spend the next 10 minutes listening to a recording by Tyler Weldon about tunnels. Tyler couldn't be with us today, but as soon as Nathaniel can pull up the video, we all get to experience Tyler TV.
Good morning. Sorry I could not be there today. My name is Tyler Weldon, and I am the Deputy Program Manager of the Bridge and Tunnel Enterprise and our state's tunnel asset manager. CDOT's tunnel owner and operators manage 20 on-system tunnels and 2 snow sheds across Colorado. We have over 7 miles of tunnels in our CDOT system. Tunnels increase speeds and reduce travel times in the mountains and canyons of our beautiful state and protect our crews and the traveling public from dangerous avalanche paths. Tunnels are critical for shorter travel times and thus more efficient commerce. Our most critical tunnels are along the I-70 corridor, through the Continental Divide, and along the Colorado River. This allows one to drive from Denver to Grand Junction in 4 hours. Tunnels are initially expensive to build, but are robust, and with asset management and maintenance, they can last for generations. Underfunding asset management and maintenance can let things deteriorate and require costly capital projects. We learned this lesson at the Eisenhower Tunnel. The larger capital repair projects will cause disruptions to mobility and require tunnel bore closures to perform critical repairs. The performance metric is to keep 75% of the network length of all the elements with a weighted condition index above 2.5. This is halfway between fair and poor condition. Our current performance is 47%. To the right, you can see that the Eisenhower and Johnson Tunnel are the reason for not meeting this target, as their length is about half of the system length. In the last 5 years, Tunnel Assets has received $9.8 million. Fortunately, Senate Bill 21267 accelerated funding for the aging Eisenhower Tunnel. This funding is being used for important fire life safety systems, including relocating the fire hydrant supply line. Our tunnel project selection process involves using the tunnel data collected by the Staff Bridge Inspection Unit. The tunnel data is used in the Dayton Ames model, and a list of treatments is produced. We use a tunnel prioritization process, including the Ames results and tunnel owner needs that are not captured by the Ames analysis. These two sets of projects are prioritized based on risk, mobility, urgency, cost, and a score is produced to help us, owners and operators, create the fiscal year project lists. The National Tunnel Inspection Program provides the data on 193 elements within our tunnels. These elements are rolled up into components that we measure for the weighted condition index. We have structural categories, mechanical, which includes ventilation, fire life safety, electrical, lighting, and civil. We had 7 tunnel projects last year. The first project I mentioned earlier was relocating the fire hydrants and water supply line to the plenum above the tunnel. This helped replace the aging heat trace and a lot of issues with the hydrants at the Eisenhower. We also worked at on the service areas. This repaved the areas around the tunnel, repaired the facade, and built a large retaining wall that was failing. The third project was a BTE project where we initiated the grouting behind the tunnel liner to help try to mitigate the water that is intruding into the plenums. The fourth project was a shotcrete repair and rock scaling project up in Boulder, at the Boulder Tunnel. We funded the video wall in the new I-70 Operations Center. And also at the Eisenhower, we repaired the grout underneath the heavy panels along the roadway. In addition, the Clear Creek Lighting and ITS project was wrapping up which provided new lights along Clear Creek Canyon and lane control for those tunnels. Our upcoming tunnel projects at the Eisenhower Tunnel include fan repairs and motor rewinds, replacing the emergency generators on the east and west side, and continuing the grout liner project. At Hanging Lake Tunnel, we have the emergency generator replacement planned. Other fire life safety items include fire cabinets and the fan flexor connections. In addition, at HLT, we are looking at a project to address the debris flow coming down Cinnamon Creek after the devastating forest fires up there. And down in Region 5, we're looking at repairs to the concrete protective coating on the tunnel walls and addressing a springtime liner leakage issue that is a concern. This year's model run at the planning budget of $9.8 million shows that we will meet our performance metric in 2028. Current pressures on tunnels include FHWA's focus through the National Tunnel Inspection Program on our mechanical systems. I anticipate there'll be increased scrutiny on our maintenance and operations. In general, I think there's a tunnel national performance metric coming, similar to bridges and pavement. Other pressures include hazmat routing through the Eisenhower. We completed the hazmat study in 2020, and we're still working through some of those next steps. In general, aging infrastructure of the Eisenhower is 50 years old, and our other complex tunnel, HLT, is 30 years old. It's going to start needing investment. And in general, integrating the new technology to our older systems has been a challenge. We just wrapped up an effort to look at all the capital and maintenance needs for tunnels over the next 20 years. An individual plan was developed for every tunnel across the state, and it took a comprehensive look at the maintenance and capital investments needed now through the next 20 years. It identified cyclic needs for every 5 years by maintenance, and it outlined immediate capital investment, medium-term investment, and long-term investment. So we built these plans to help tunnel owners identify projects that they could bring to the tunnel prioritization process that would be eligible for tunnel asset funds. In addition to tunnel asset funding, the Bridge and Tunnel Enterprise is now able to fund tunnel projects. With the passage of Senate Bill 21260, which added tunnels to the Bridge Enterprise and focused the enterprise on the CDOT 10-year plan, the Eisenhower Tunnel is now eligible for BTE funding because it is the only tunnel project on the 10-year plan. Currently, BTE is funding the Plenum Liner project, as we spoke about before. We are looking at funding the construction phase of the emergency generators for the Eisenhower, the LED lights and electrical distribution, and the Johnson Variable Frequency Drive for the ventilation system. In total, BTE is committing to $100 million of investment into the Eisenhower Tunnel. This is my last slide. I wanted to thank you for your attention to tunnel assets and have a good day. Good morning.
Okay,
Sorry I
perfect.
could not be there today.
Okay, perfect. We're happy Tyler was able to share that information about tunnels, and we're now going to return to our live program with Alan Sheet and Intelligent Transportation Systems. Alan?
Good morning. Thank you, Toby, for the opportunity to explain our ITS Asset Management Program today. I'm Alan Scheid, the ITS Asset Manager. Next slide, please. ITS serves three large stakeholders. First, the public, in which we provide them awareness and resources so that they can proactively plan trips, react to changing conditions, and make better decisions while navigating our highway systems. Next is other government agencies in determining where and when to start plowing snow, avalanche mitigation, and traffic management planning and emergency response team utilizing tools provided by ITS more effectively do their jobs and make data-driven decisions to restore traffic flow. And third, the third stakeholder is enterprises such as CTIO, commercial vehicles, and public-private partners who use ITS devices and facilities to operate tolling and manage lanes, implement chain laws, permitting, camera video sharing, and dynamic signs to inform their customers on travel and road conditions. Next slide, please. The risks of budget shortfalls lead to inaccurate or no notices to traveling public for construction delays, weather road closures, or accident delays. We also risk delinquent utility bills resulting in higher cost and late fees and cancellations of services, and the inability to real-time traffic information dissemination to the traveling public, which provides a safer traveling experience and lower secondary crashes. We also risk the inability to support tolling efforts and damage to CDOT's fiber infrastructure or inability to repair in a timely fashion. Next slide, please. Our targets is to maintain our assets under 90% useful life. Our metrics for FY24 is in the table on the right. Some outside influences are technology advances we may not need to replace with the same equipment. Connected vehicle technology may replace message signs, for example, in the future. Older hardware will also not support updates for security patches, requiring new hardware sooner, and we also have harsh weather and mountain areas for devices, cause early failure. Next slide, please. ITS performance and funding has remained level for the next 15 years. The left chart shows ITS experience higher monthly costs for utilities as devices are added and rates increase. We are lowering our costs on cellular modems as we expand our fiber optic network. On the right, we show our annual maintenance costs. If devices fail, we rely on ITS maintenance to replace or repair the device. Daily updates are made to our inventory based on maintenance activities. ITS has also experienced higher costs associated with maintenance as more devices become closer to 100% useful life. Variable message signs are 25-year devices, but cost more to maintain as they age, plus they require labor-intensive and higher cost lane closures. Next slide, please. ITS selection process starts with the replacement list created based on the end of useful life from real-time data. As technology advances, we adjust the list to see if the device needs to be replaced. Obsolete equipment with no replacement parts are then factored in. The list is then reviewed with maintenance, operation, public information office, and resident engineers' input and feedback. We prioritize and finalize the list with budget constraints. Then we proceed to project planning. Throughout the process, we do have continuous ITS maintenance for when devices fail, and we update the device replacement dates at the same time. Plus, we have ongoing projects such as Central 70 and I-70 Floyd Hill that will replace, remove, and add equipment. Next slide, please. In FY23, ITS added network devices to 66 locations of CDOT's maintenance yards utilizing CDOT fiber. CDOT completed 316 miles of new fiber extending from Glenwood Springs to Grand Junction and Walsenburg to New Mexico border. It has completed a redundant data center in Hanging Lakes Tunnel in case the CTMC data center is offline. Central 70 was also completed and online, and ITS added 616 devices and 173 new electric service meters in that project. Next slide, please. Key projects in coming years. ITS has inherited DTD's assets would include 123 automated traffic recorders. Connected vehicle technology has replaced the trip travel time indicator statewide. This alleviated the need for replacement of the TTIs. However, there are over 400 connected vehicle systems planned for installation next year or so. ITS will also onboard a fiber management application to better track, troubleshoot, and maintain our growing fiber infrastructure. This fiber infrastructure is used for providing internet access to our maintenance sheds and barns, lower monthly costs for cellular communications, and partner with other entities for redundancy and provide network access. Next slide, please. Our Ames curve showing results for the next 15 years based on the amount of funding available. Current plan budget will not maintain our current metrics or target, so we have some work to do. Next slide, please. Current pressures, CDOT fiber leasing commits CDOT to contract obligations concerning the fiber optic network. The fiber optic network must be maintained and managed to protect the asset from damage and provide the ability expected on the leases. 43% of our weather stations are no longer supported by the manufacturer for security updates and replacement parts. As of 2016, when we received the notice, we've only been able to upgrade 64% since then. ITS also has over 1,100 network switches that are end of life and will have to be replaced to maintain security of CDOT's network. Next slide, please. ITS efficiencies. ITS architecture will be implemented, allowing projects to standardize and prevent old technologies from being deployed. ITS architecture also provides a process that will incorporate new technology as technology advances. ITS architecture will also allow us to question the need for the asset before implementation. We also have a systems engineering assessment process that allows us to start the conversations early in new projects, update assets and technologies as projects are being designed and maintained. An ITS asset that will last its full life expectancy. This process will also prevent overgrowth in evaluating projects before design and construction. We also have a add, change, and remove form that allows our inventory to be updated in real time as devices are failed and replaced in the field. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alan. And our last presentation will be given by Bob Group, who is going to tell us about rockfall, cut slopes, and everything else in the geohazards program. Bob?
Thanks, Toby. I'll do my best to finish in 1 minute so we can stay on schedule.
Oh, you're good. Take it down.
Hey, everybody. I'm Bob Group. I'm the geohazards asset manager here at CDOT. And I'm going to talk to you about how we manage geologic hazards on the transportation system. Next slide. I think the most frequent question we get is how do geohazards belong in asset management? I think the response to that is the bulk of what we manage is actually constructed geotechnical assets in the form of soil embankments and constructed rock slopes. When those deteriorate or fail, it actually presents as more of a hazard, but it's really deterioration of a constructed asset. That being said, we do manage some natural hazards in the form of rockfall and rock slides from natural slopes, debris flows, landslides, and sinkholes. Why are geohazards important? They present threats to the transportation system in a few different ways. There are safety threats in the form of injuries and fatalities, mobility impacts in terms of highway closures and delays, and owner impacts. When things fall down, they tend to break our pavements and our walls, to a lesser extent, bridges and culverts and ITS. And then there's also a demand on maintenance to, they're the first responders who are there to clean things up. They also have to staff the closures. So there's a hit on the MLOS side. Next slide. We have a couple of big updates for 2024. I think the biggest one is an expansion of our inventory. Prior to this year, our inventory was event-based, meaning we only looked at something if we had a hazard event occur. And when we stopped and thought about managing things in terms of event-driven only, it felt a lot more like crisis management than asset management. So we went through a pretty major effort throughout 2023 and 2024 to go out and inventory all of the constructed geotechnical assets in the form of embankments and rock slopes where we didn't have a history of an event, and also all slopes that would pose a credible threat of some other type of hazard, be it a landslide or a debris flow. And that resulted in an expansion of our inventory by an order of magnitude. We went from 3,900 segments to 39,000 segments of highway that have either experienced or are at risk of experiencing a geohazard or geotechnical asset deterioration. And those segments are 1/10 of a mile highway segments. The other big change is on modeling and treatments. Prior to this year, we had one deterioration rate for all of our segments and also one treatment type. That wasn't really representative of how we saw things deteriorating in the field and the range of treatment types that we would deploy. So we added 2 additional deterioration rates. So now we have a fast, a slow, and a static rate. And then in addition to our rehabilitation maintenance type that we used previously, we also introduced a reconstruction and a maintenance to capture those higher cost and lower cost treatments that we utilize on occasion. Next slide. So geohazard risks. What happens if we don't manage geologic hazards through the asset management program? Those risks don't go away. They just get transferred onto the other assets and onto the highway users. The photo here is of a debris flow that occurred in Glenwood Canyon following the Grizzly Creek fire. And you can see that we really do capture just about every other asset class, being at risk to being impacted by these hazard events. Maintenance is in there cleaning up. They're also staffing the closure. There was damage to the pavement. There was a culvert that got completely plugged with debris, and the inlet sheared off. The bridge rail was torn off and needed to be replaced. The retaining walls were damaged and needed to be replaced. There was even fiber optic line in the ditch line there that was damaged and needed to be repaired. So it's the more we can pull those impacts out of those other assets having to deal with it on an emergency basis, and we can deal with it proactively, the more the better. Next slide. Metric and target. So our performance metric, we try to track everything in terms of a level of risk or risk per highway segment represented in dollars. So what that looks like in that big equation in the box there, we really try to combine the likelihood and consequence of a geohazard event impacting the highway. So that orange box on the left is the likelihood of a certain hazard type occurring, and we multiply that by a safety consequence expressed in dollars, a user consequence expressed in dollars in terms of delay time or closure time, and then an ownership cost in dollars to respond to the event, clean it up, repair anything that needs to be repaired. And we express that in an annualized basis in dollars per highway segment. And we assign, depending on what that dollar value is, a letter grade ranging from A through F. And our target is to have 85% or more of our highway segments with a level of risk of $5,000 annually or less, which puts it in the A or the B category. Next slide. Funding and performance. Our historical funding has hovered roughly around $10 million, plus or minus every year. The performance has kind of bounced up and down a little bit, predominantly due to how our previous inventory worked with it being event-based. we would add segments every year as new events came in. So it was really hard to track, whether or not we were making progress. You can see at FY24, we've got that 79% with the asterisk. The performance shows, a slight increase this year. I think a lot of that is coming from, a portion of it is from mitigating hazard events. A lot of it is also coming from our expanded inventory and adding in a lot of those lower risk A and B sites. But going forward, we are hoping to get rid of some of that, up and down from adding events into the inventory every year. I think from here forward, we'll be able to better track how our investments are affecting our performance year to year. Next slide. Project selection process. The way that we have deployed projects in the past is we look statewide at all of our segments that have experienced an event or are susceptible to an event. We bundle those into areas of concentrated risk that we call corridors. There'd be like a canyon that would be a corridor, or a certain portion of I-70 with a lot of hazards in it and commonly traveled, that'd be a corridor. And we go through and we perform a corridor management study where we do a deep dive into all of the sites in the corridor, assess what those sites are costing us on an annual basis in an unmitigated state. And then we project out what they will continue to cost us over the next 30 to 50 years. And then we look at different treatment options and the benefit that those will provide us if we mitigate that site and that reduced cost over the next 30 to 50 years. And that lets us do a benefit cost analysis for a range of different treatment types. And we'll go through and select the best, the treatment type that provides the best benefit cost ratio over that 30 to 50 year time period. Next slide. Recent projects and upcoming projects. From FY21 through the current year, we've been predominantly focused on the Highway 133 corridor in Region 3. The mitigation projects there have been a combination of rockfall mitigation, debris flow mitigation, and embankment repairs. We'll wrap up in that corridor this year in FY24. We'll have one more project in Region 3 in FY24 before we shift our efforts to Region 5, predominantly Highway 550 rockfall mitigation and landslide repair on State Highway 84 near the New Mexico border. Next slide. Geohazards forecast. You can see our target line of 85% with segments B or better. At our current planning budget, we don't quite get there. We're hovering right around that 80% level. A lot of that has to do with sites that are in the B category deteriorating from a B to a C, so we can't quite keep up with those falling out of that B category at the current funding level. Next slide. Okay, wrapping it up with current pressures and efficiencies. Like pretty much everybody else said, construction cost escalation has been a real challenge for us in recent years. On the material side, we use a lot of steel to mitigate geologic hazards. We install catchment fences and draped wire netting. I think more so than the materials is to install hazard mitigation, it takes a lot of specialized labor. So contractors have a pretty small labor pool to draw from to staff their projects. It takes a lot of time to get somebody trained up to the point where they're able to do this type of construction. So we've got hit in the labor category a little bit harder than anything else. The other big pressure over the past 5 to probably 7 or 8 years has been an increase in extreme weather events, increasing both the incidence and the scope of hazards affecting the highway. And we really get hit whether that's extreme dry or extreme wet conditions. On the extreme dry end, there's wildfires that occur, and in subsequent years, that increases the the size and the likelihood of debris flow mudslide events. And then in wetter years or more extreme storm events, even if the average is the same, higher precipitation leads to an increase in the number and size of rockfall events. It also increases the incidence of landslides and even debris flows in non-burned areas. In response to all this, there's been a big push for implementing resilience measures on transportation projects. I think that's a great idea. I think that will benefit us in the long run, where we invest that money now and it pays dividends in the future. But while we're just getting started up with that, that really manifests in kind of an increased cost burden, because while these are more effective in the long run, more resilient treatment measures are more expensive up front. There have been a handful of efficiencies that we've been working to implement. One is proactive monitoring of rock slopes, and that takes the form of going out and doing these three-dimensional scans of rock slopes on repeat intervals and comparing the latest scan to the previous scans and seeing where there are changes in the slope. One thing that helps us do is better characterize our rock slopes and better characterize the deterioration of them. But another thing that it's allowed us to do is we've actually been able to track movement of specific rock features that are displacing from the slope, and we've been able to go in and stabilize those before they turn into a rock slide event. So it's really catching the event and mitigating it before it happens. The photo on the right there is from the rock slope on the west side of Floyd Hill, where we were able to track one of those features and go and stabilize it before it failed and impacted the roadway and caused a big delay headache for the public. Other efficiencies are identifying areas where our geohazard corridors overlap with the 10-year plan and going in and bundling mitigation efforts into those projects. We're able to utilize the existing project infrastructure and take advantage of cost savings there, so we can focus more of our dollars on just the treatment itself and not getting a project off the ground and managing a project. And we're also trying to expand our use of maintenance treatments pretty dramatically, recognizing that we don't need to mitigate all of our sites to that A category. It's okay to spend a little bit less, or in some cases a lot less, and move those to that lower or slightly higher risk B category, but still an acceptable level of risk. And that's an area where we've just started to do that in the last year or so, and have identified areas for we can do that with a lot more frequency in the future. And that wraps it up for me.
Thank you so much, Bob. We are running over time, but hopefully everyone has been following the Q&A in the chat. Some good discussion there. Should you have additional thoughts, feel free to email the asset managers or those of us in the TAM program. We'll now conclude State of the Assets 2024. We hope you've learned a lot and that we sparked interest in our program. I want to give a big thank you to all the asset managers and to Nathaniel for helping run the show. Great job, everyone. As I said in the intro, these assets form the core of what CDOT offers the state. So the more we can learn about them and have serious discussions about taking care of them, the better. With that, we thank you for coming, and we hope you have a great weekend. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Toby.
Thank you.